My name is David Ellison. I'm 34 years old, and 11 days ago, while I was too sick to stand on my own, I signed away my wife's chance to ever touch my grandfather's company again. She did not know that when she packed the suitcases. She did not know it when she kissed my forehead and told me to rest, that she and our daughter were leaving for a week at the coast, and that my nephew Tyler would look after me because I was, in her words, too much to manage right now. I smiled. I told her to have a good trip. Then, 3 days later, alone in that house with a fever of 103 and a laptop propped against my knees, I did something she never saw coming. By the time she walked back through our front door, with sand still caught in her sandals, the company she believed she was about to inherit no longer belonged to either of us. Her business partner stopped returning her calls. Her lawyer's number stopped connecting. And the account she had already quietly started borrowing against, the one meant for our daughter's future, was somewhere she could never reach again. Before I tell you what happened next, please hit like and subscribe. Drop your city and local time below. I love knowing where you're listening from. Now let me take you back 6 years to a Sunday afternoon in my grandfather's workshop when he said something I did not understand until the week I got sick. My grandfather, Walter Ellison, built Ellison Millworks with his own hands in 1971. In a converted barn that still smelled 40 years later of cedar shavings and machine oil. That smell is the smell of my childhood. Every Sunday, while my parents worked double shifts trying to keep up with bills, I rode my bike to that workshop and sat on an overturned crate while my grandfather ran his hands along a piece of walnut like he was reading it. The floor of that workshop had one board that always creaked right by the door, and I could hear him coming before I saw him. I still hear it sometimes, in houses that are nothing like his. He was not a soft man. He did not say, "I love you," the way people do in movies. He said it in the way he set aside the good chisels for me before I was old enough to use them. He said it in the venison stew his wife made every Sunday, the kind with the burnt edge of onion in it. The kind I have never been able to recreate since she passed. There is one afternoon I go back to more than any other. I was 11. I had asked him why he never let my father touch the business ledgers. My father was his son. It seemed unfair to me then. He set down the plane he was holding. He wiped his hands on a rag that never seemed to get any cleaner, no matter how many times he used it. Then he said the sentence I would not understand for another 23 years. The people who love you protect you when you're strong, David. The people who are using you protect themselves when you're weak. You watch which one someone becomes the day it costs them something. I nodded like I understood. I did not. At home, things were different. My parents loved each other, but money made them tired in a way that turned into silence at the dinner table. There was no cedar smell in that house. There was carpet that never quite dried after it rained, and a furnace that clicked twice before it caught. My grandfather started teaching me the business properly when I was 16, after my father passed in a car accident on the interstate. Grief made my grandfather quieter, but it also made him more deliberate. He began bringing me into meetings. He began introducing me formally as the next Ellison who'll run this. My cousin Marcus, my father's brother's son, was in some of those meetings too, until he wasn't. My grandfather stopped inviting him after Marcus tried, twice, to convince him to sell the company to a furniture conglomerate out of Ohio. Marcus said it was about being practical. My grandfather said practical was a word people used when they meant something colder. There was a particular Sunday, the autumn I turned 14, when it rained so hard the workshop roof leaked over the far corner, right above the stack of pine my grandfather was saving for a client's dining table. He did not panic. He simply moved the wood, set an old paint can under the drip, and kept working like the sound of rain hitting metal was just another instrument in the room. I remember thinking, even then, that he handled small disasters the same way he handled everything, calmly, without wasted motion, like the outcome had already been decided somewhere quieter than the moment itself. I met Sarah when I was 26, 3 years before my grandfather died. She was warm then. She laughed at things that were not really that funny, and I liked that about her. My grandfather met her twice before the wedding. He never said a bad word about her, but I remember him watching her hands, the way he watched wood grain, like he was checking for something underneath the surface that the surface wasn't telling him. He did not live to walk me down any aisle or to meet our daughter Chloe. He died in his sleep the winter I turned 31, in the house that always smelled like cedar on a Sunday, which felt right and wrong at the same time. I did not know then exactly what he had left behind for me. I only knew that something in the way our family lawyer looked at me at the funeral told me this was not finished. Beat. Grief moves slowly through a company. For the first year after my grandfather died, everything looked the same. I ran Ellison Millworks the way he taught me. Sarah supported me, or seemed to. She started coming to more dinners with clients. She started using words like our assets and our position in conversations that used to just be about our life. I did not think much of it at the time. That is the thing about a slow turn. You cannot feel it happening while you are inside it. You only feel it later, looking back, the way you notice a scar has been there longer than you remembered. The change, I did notice, was smaller than I expected it to be. Sarah stopped asking about the workshop. She used to like the smell of it, back when we were dating, back when she would visit while I worked late and sit on the same kind of overturned crate I sat on as a boy. Now, if I mentioned a Sunday there, she would say something about how sentimental I was getting, like it was a flaw I needed to manage. 14 months after the funeral, I came home early from a supplier meeting and heard her on the phone in the kitchen. I did not mean to listen. I meant to walk in and say hello, but something in her voice stopped my hand on the door. If he's declared unfit, even temporarily, the trustee provisions default to the surviving spouse, she said. Marcus's lawyer already confirmed it. We just need documentation, something official. A hospitalization would actually help our case, not hurt it. I stood in the hallway and did not breathe the way I usually breathe. Marcus, my cousin, the one who had wanted to sell the company to strangers in Ohio, the one my grandfather had stopped inviting to meetings 20 years earlier for exactly this kind of thinking. I did not walk into that kitchen. I did not confront her. I went back out to my car, sat in the driveway for 11 minutes, and then came back inside and asked how her day was. That is the word they use for everything that used to be love, position, case, documentation. I filed each word away like my grandfather used to file a piece of lumber, checking it for grain, for weakness, for where it might split under pressure. I started noticing other things after that. Small things, the way Sarah began keeping her laptop closed when I walked into a room, the way she started asking Chloe's teacher, unprompted, about how stressed I seemed at pickup, the way she brought up, twice in 1 month, how much easier things would be if the company just had cleaner management. I did not have proof yet. I did not have a plan. What I had was invisibility. Because Sarah had stopped seeing me as a threat the moment she started seeing me as an asset to be managed. My grandfather was right. I had watched what she became the day it started costing her something. And what she became was patient. I decided quietly in that same driveway that I would be patient too. I started keeping copies of things, financial statements, emails from Marcus that Sarah forwarded to her personal account instead of deleting, thinking I would never check. I did not know yet what any of it would build toward. I only knew the way my grandfather knew grain in wood, that something underneath the surface was not what it appeared to be. 6 weeks before I got sick, I was going through a box of my grandfather's old files in the workshop attic, looking for a supplier contract from the 90s that a client had asked about. Instead, I found an envelope with my name on it in his handwriting, tucked inside a folder marked simply, "For David, when it's time." Inside was a letter and a business card for a man named Grant Whitfield, an estate attorney in the city, someone I'd never heard my grandfather mention. The letter was short. My grandfather was not a man of many written words. It said that he had watched enough families lose businesses to people who married into them with good intentions and finished with bad ones. It said he was not accusing anyone of anything. It said he had simply built a room with no door for anyone but me, just in case. I called Grant Whitfield the next morning from my truck in the workshop parking lot before I told anyone, including Sarah, that the letter existed. Grant remembered my grandfather well. He told me in his calm, unhurried voice that 8 years before he died, Walter Ellison had restructured the ownership of Ellison Millworks into an irrevocable trust, naming me as sole beneficiary, with a provision that could not be altered, contested, or reassigned by marriage, incapacitation, or court order, except by my own signature while of sound mind. Pause. Sarah's plan, whatever shape it eventually took, was built on an assumption that was already false. The company was never something a court could hand to a surviving spouse, because in the eyes of the law, my grandfather had made sure I was never fully the owner to begin with. I was the steward of something that had already been placed permanently out of anyone's reach but mine. I did not tell Sarah, I did not tell Marcus. I let 3 more weeks pass exactly as they had been passing. Business as usual, dinners as usual, her closed laptop as usual. Then I got sick, genuinely sick, not manufactured. A bad flu that turned into pneumonia within 4 days. The kind that puts you flat on your back with a fever that makes the ceiling swim. Sarah scheduled the beach trip during that same week. She told me it had been booked for months, that Chloe needed the normalcy, that my nephew Tyler, 20 years old and between semesters, could handle keeping an eye on things. I heard her on the phone with Marcus the night before she left, through the wall between our bedroom and the hallway. "This is the documentation window," she said. "Confirmed diagnosis, confirmed incapacity, confirmed absence of me at his bedside, so it doesn't look coordinated. We just need 48 hours of him looking like he can't function, and Grant's old paperwork won't matter because we'll have new paperwork." She did not know Grant's paperwork had a name. She thought it was just old paperwork. I texted him 2 words the next morning after her car pulled out of the driveway. "It's time." That night, while Sarah posted photos of Chloe building a sandcastle 300 miles away, I lay in bed with a fever and thought about my grandfather checking her hands at our wedding, looking for the grain underneath. He had already known. He had known for years, in the way people who love you sometimes know things before you're ready to. She went to sleep that night, I imagine, thinking she had 48 hours and a plan. I went to sleep already having one. Grant Whitfield came to the house himself the next morning, which he told me later was not something he usually did for clients. But he had promised my grandfather, a long time ago, that if this day ever came, he would not make me handle it over the phone with a fever. He sat at my kitchen table and walked me through it in plain language. The trust was already airtight. What we needed to do now was formalize my ongoing capacity through a documented physician's evaluation, taken while I was sick but lucid, so that no future claim of incapacity could ever be built retroactively on this particular illness. We needed my own signature today, reaffirming the trustee designation, closing what Grant called the only theoretical gap, which was simply the possibility that I might someday choose myself to change it. He explained the difference between a company that belongs to a marriage and a company that belongs to a bloodline with a locked door. He said my grandfather had chosen the second on purpose, years before anyone suspected it would matter. My nephew Tyler, who had been quietly bringing me soup and refilling my water glass all week, sat in on part of that conversation because I asked him to. He is 20. He does not know yet what it costs to watch people you love become people who use you. I want him to learn it slower than I did. Marcus called me directly, 3 days into Sarah's trip. His voice was warm in a way it had not been warm with me in 15 years. He said he'd been thinking about family, about how the company could use fresh energy, about how he would make sure I was taken care of if I ever wanted to step back and focus on getting well. He said Sarah had mentioned I seemed overwhelmed lately. I told him I would think about it. Chloe called that same evening before Sarah took the phone back and asked in her small, distracted way if I was still sick, or getting better sick. I told her getting better sick. She said good, because she wanted me to come see the sandcastle before the tide got it. I said I would try. I did not tell her that her mother had spent the week building something with a much shorter shelf life than any sandcastle, or that it had already washed away before Sarah even knew the tide had come in. Tyler asked me that night, sitting on the porch, why I did not just call Sarah and confront her over the phone. I did not have a clean answer for him at first. I told him what my grandfather told me once, that the people using you show you exactly who they are the moment it costs them something, and that the smartest thing you can do with that information is nothing until the moment you have already made it not matter. I drove out to the workshop alone that night, fever and all, against Grant's advice and Tyler's protest. I sat on the same crate I sat on when I was 11. The board by the door still creaks. I ran my hand along a piece of walnut my grandfather never finished. I wish this were different. I wish Sarah had been the kind of partner who would have sat beside me in that hospital bed instead of building a case around it. I wish she had needed nothing from me but my company, in the other sense of the word. But wishes do not hold a family together. A room with no door does. I cried there quietly, not because I was weak, but because I finally understood what my grandfather had known for years and never said out loud, not even once, in all those Sunday afternoons. He had not been protecting a business. He had been protecting me from exactly this, and if you have ever had to stay silent to protect yourself, even when every part of you wanted to speak up, tell me in the comments. I read every one. At 11:50 that night, Grant called me on video from his home office, still in his work shirt, a stack of papers visible on the desk behind him. He walked me through the final document one more time, slowly, the way he had promised my grandfather he would, all those years ago, if this day ever came. I signed it at my kitchen table, laptop propped against a stack of Chloe's school books, fever finally breaking into a cold sweat that felt, for the first time in a week, like relief instead of illness. Grant countersigned as witness. He told me my grandfather would be proud, in the understated way people from his generation say things they mean completely. Then he told me to get some rest, that the rest was paperwork now, filed and permanent, and, as of that signature, unreachable by anyone but me. The timestamp on the confirmation email read 12:03 a.m. I am 34. I am, as of that minute, the sole and irrevocable steward of everything my grandfather built. With every gap Sarah believed existed now formally, legally closed. I sat in the quiet kitchen for a long time after Grant hung up. Tyler had fallen asleep on the couch with the television still murmuring. The house made the small, settling sounds houses make at night, nothing like the creak of my grandfather's workshop floor, but close enough that I thought of him anyway. 300 miles away, Sarah was asleep in a hotel room that smelled like sunscreen and ocean air, with a plan she believed still had 40 hours left on the clock. She was still thinking in terms of documentation windows and confirmed incapacity, still building a case against a door that had been locked for 8 years before she ever met me. She would find that out in about 36 hours. They came home on a Sunday, which felt, again, like something my grandfather would have noticed. Chloe ran in first, sunburned and sandy, talking about a dolphin she had seen from the pier. Sarah followed with the suitcases, tanned, relaxed, already asking how I was feeling in a voice that had exactly the right amount of concern in it. That afternoon, at a small gathering for Chloe's birthday that Sarah had planned weeks ago, Marcus pulled me aside near the drink table. He said again how good it was to see me looking stronger. He said maybe now was the time to talk about restructuring the leadership, about bringing in someone with more bandwidth. He thought I was 2 weeks ago. I was not. I had not been for 8 years, since the day my grandfather locked a door I did not even know existed. I did not raise my voice. I did not gloat over the cake and the balloons in my own daughter's honor. I simply told Sarah quietly in the kitchen, away from Chloe, that Grant Whitfield would be in touch about next steps, and that the documentation window she had been counting on had closed itself the moment she opened it. She did not say anything for a long time. There was nothing left in that particular argument for her to say. My grandfather used to tell me that the people who love you protect you when you're strong, and the people who are using you protect themselves when you're weak, and that I should watch which one someone becomes the day it costs them something. I always thought he meant it as advice about business partners, about people outside the family. He meant it about anyone, including the person you build a life with. He meant that love does not disappear the day it gets expensive. It just shows you, clearly, for the first time, what it was actually made of. Marcus has not called since that afternoon. I hear he is still looking for someone new to convince. Sarah and I are separating quietly without the fight either of us expected, because there was nothing left worth fighting over that she could still reach. Grant Whitfield still handles the trust, and still tells me every year, on the anniversary of my grandfather's death, that he is proud of how I handled it. As for me, I still have the workshop. Tyler comes on Sundays now, sits on the same crate I sat on at 11 years old, learning the way I learned, one board at a time. The floor by the door still creaks. I've never fixed it. I do not think I ever will. I think about my grandfather every time I run my hand along a piece of walnut he never got to finish. And I think some people build you an inheritance. He built me a door only I could open. If you have ever had to protect something quietly, without anyone knowing until it was already done, I want to hear your story. Tell me in the comments, and if this story moved you, subscribe. There are more to come.